All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, report from me on drawdown of Lower Spring Lake by the village of Palmyra. I found out about that meeting in the morning, that was a week ago. They were talking about lowering the lake again, to try and kill off, I forget the name of the weed, but it's very invasive.
Milfoil.
Milfoil. When they drained it the first time, 62% of the lake had the milfoil in it. Now there's 82%. They're talking of draining down again, hoping that we, folks, I know you just love to hear it 40 and 50 below zero to kill it off. That's what they're hoping, but we haven't seen that for a long time, okay? But that's what they want to do. Now there are 10 residents that also want to do lake dredging. The village has control of that because they control the dam. That's why we don't hear much of it. Although since I was there, Mr. and Mrs. Dixon did kindly send me well, I probably sent it to you, but the plan of the lake.
I don't understand that.
Okay, anyway, I got that. But that's what's going on there. I don't know what the village is going to do. If I was going to bet right now, I'd say they'd say no. That they won't lower it again. My opinion is, and there are chemicals that can be used. Some of you farm folks have heard the words 2,4-D. They can actually use that. But obviously it doesn't work well in cold weather. And you don't want to kill a bunch of the good stuff. If they drain it down again, I simply stated, and there was 4 DNR people there. I got an education that way. And one guy's in charge of the chemical use. He's the one that says whether you can use it or not. And he's not against that in certain situations, but they got to put a battle plan together for that whole thing. So it's still up in the air. Table till the next meeting. That's what's going on with the problem with the milfoil has gotten worse instead of better.
Did the DNR say that you can kill the milfoil or not?
Well, for sure you can kill it with a chemical, but you're hoping.
Will they bless it?
Well,
We had a lot of problems with that on Blue Spring Lake.
They think the best route to go is the lowering the lake again, draining the lake. And for you fisher people out there, Mike Fisher was there and asking a lot of questions, about size of fish and stuff like that. And it's not come back to where it was pre-lake. I don't even know much about fishing, but like a northern 26 is the legal, you can catch a northern. We only got 2 out of the fishery last year, 2 that were legal. And the DNR did catch some fish, and the biggest they found was 21 inches. So obviously people are worried about that when you start talking restocking the lake. So those are the concerns, but again, the village does have the final say on that. Thank you. Number 13, discussion and possible action on 2023-001 resolution for signatures on bank accounts. Laura?
So I talked to the Wisconsin County Association, and they said you can either modify, add folks to the bank account through a resolution or an ordinance, and most towns do it through a resolution. So I have a resolution here. I could read it. At one point I'm going to stop and we'll talk a little bit about it. So resolution of Town of Palmyra Board to authorize withdrawal of town monies. Town of Palmyra, Jefferson County Resolution number 2023-001. Town of Palmyra, Jefferson County, Wisconsin, by this resolution adopted by a majority of the town board on a roll call vote with a quorum present and voting and proper notice having been given, resolves and orders as follows. It is resolved that First Citizens Bank Bank has been designated as a public depository by the town of Elmira pursuant to Wisconsin statutes, that the persons listed below are hereby authorized for and on behalf of the town to sign order checks as provided in section 660607(3) Wisconsin statutes for payment or withdrawal of money from said accounts, and to issue instructions regarding the same, and to endorse for deposit, negotiation, collection, or discount by bank any and all checks, drafts, notes, bills, certificates of deposit, or other instruments or orders for the payment of money owed or held by said town, that the endorsement for deposit may be in writing by stamp or otherwise, with or without designation of signature of the agent so endorsing, and that any one of the persons holding the offices of the town designated below is hereby authorized to make oral or written requests of the bank for transfer of funds or money between accounts maintained by the town at the bank. The town officials authorized to exercise the powers granted herein are listed below. This authorization is for the town officials described herein and not specifically to the individuals currently holding those positions. The chair would be the primary signature, supervisor 1 would be the primary backup signature, supervisor 2 would be the secondary backup signature, and the clerk treasurer is a secondary signature. So right now, Frank and I sign the checks, but if Frank's not available, then Rob would be his replacement. Or if neither one of us are available, then Rob and Josh would be able to sign the checks and make sure that we get our bills paid. This resolution applies to the following accounts. Now, in the sample account resolution that I used, they actually listed their account numbers. I was not comfortable doing that. I can certainly put those in. So account number, whatever, general fund, number of signatures required to, account number, whatever, tax account, number of signatures required to. And then the town clerk treasurer shall properly post or publish this resolution as required under statute 60.80 Wisconsin stats. So it's up to you guys to decide, do you want the account numbers, or are you comfortable with it saying the general fund and the tax account?
I would be comfortable with the general fund and the tax account. I don't think those numbers should be singled out there.
We have general fund, we have a tax account, we have the bank, what's it, the box.
Oh, safety deposit.
So thank you, safety deposit box, and then we have a municipal, bond, the loan for Little Prairie Road. Those are the ones that we have right now, so to say general fund or tax account, I think would be sufficient. But it's up to you to say whether or not you want to put the actual account numbers on it.
And folks, this is not something that, Laura came up with. Rob and I went to the class again, and WTA, you can't just have two, you gotta have a backup signature in case something happens. Laura goes down, sick, whatever, car accident.
Wins the lottery.
$150 million coming to me. Yes.
So that was a point that was brought up during this training session that I went to with Rob, and that's why we're talking about it. I think that this should be done without the account numbers on the resolution.
And that's acceptable to,
Yes,
okay.
yeah.
I agree.
I happen to disagree.
Oh.
Within reason. I've got a handful of questions. Number one, we've also got an LGIP, accounts, right? That someone is the authorized signator or signatories for. Just as I know we have those. Obviously, you talked about the, secondary or tertiary account for citizens.
Yes,
I think we should also have a similar chain of command for those financial accounts, even though it's not part of this, I understand that. From a safety of finances standpoint, knowing how things can work, not accusing anyone at this table, but if it was X'd out minus the last four, or the last four digits of the account numbers were listed, so that they could be cross-referenced, worst case scenario, Frank and Laura don't have a vacation account somewhere where they're each one's going to Maui, one's going to wherever.
really go to town.
That's fine.
Okay.
I'm just saying, Dixon, Illinois is a prime example of what happens in municipal government when no
Yes.
one really knows what accounts go where. And from that standpoint, I think having the last four of the account numbers would be a safe check of, are you or are you not authorized to have this
Okay.
account listed? But at the same point, the LGIPs and any other financial institutions that we hold money with, I think would be worthwhile to include on that list if we are actively utilizing them, which leads to a completely different question that I'm gonna pose now and hopefully we can talk about at some point. Where does the majority of our general fund balance sit, in one of these general accounts or in an LGIP account where it's actually earning interest?
The majority of the funds are in the bank.
Okay.
Yeah. There's that little, based on the treasurer's report, you have just that little bit of money in the LGIP.
So I'm guessing just as an FYI, I'm guessing that our checking account is not earning 5.9% interest on it, and I know that the LGIP is, and for a community that doesn't have a whole lot of pots to bring the money from, we may wanna think about coming up with financial policy where we hold 1 month's worth of generalized fund balance in our checking account, and the rest of it goes into an LGIP so that we can actually earn some money on it
And that would need to be put on the agenda for,
some other day.
So if you look at your bill report, it also shows deposits and redeposits. As of 5/31/2023, we got an interest deposit of $2.76.
So on $300,000, we'd be looking at probably $2,900 a month that we could earn on our own without having to worry about anybody saying one way or the other. But that's today. 2 years ago, it was marginal, but right now interest is worthwhile at the LGIP.
I like the idea of having the last X and out and having the last 4 digits of the accounts listed.
Okay.
We've done that.
And I can get those. So the resolution would be sufficient with having the last 4 digits of both accounts listed for what's with the bank. Because again, up above, it talks about the accounts with the First Citizen State Bank. If you wanted another resolution with LGIP, then I would have to build something around that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And whether it's 4 or 3, it would depend on the number before that. Are they all the same before that, or,
Yeah, I don't,
you know what I mean? So,
yeah, I'm not sure.
but some sort of 2, 3, 4 numbers that we can
Yeah.
differentiate them.
Yeah.
Doesn't give it away if all the other numbers, like on here, 2101, are consistent.
Yeah, I'll have to look and see.
I would make the motion to approve resolution 2023-001, including the listing of only the last 4 digits of the account numbers for account 1, general fund, account 2, tax account. That's it.
Second, pending her determine how many numbers it should be.
okay, a motion's been made to pass resolution 2023-001 and only using the last 4 digits of the general fund account number and tax account number. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Discussion and possible action to revise 2022-003 ordinance regulating engine braking on town of Palmyra roads. I'm asking to have this tabled. I have to check something else out after talking about
We need a motion to do that.
Yes.
I make a motion that we table this till the July meeting pending Frank checking out whatever he has to check out.
Second.
Motion's been made to table item number 14, discussion and possible action to revise 2022-003. All in favor?
Aye.
Discussion and possible action on recommendation from Highway Committee for designated highway construction funding.
appreciate this being noticed on the agenda. As I said, we met June the 1st, to discuss where we're gonna go for road construction, in 2023. Went through a whole bunch of different things. Ultimately, this was one of the items that was generally pertinent. As an update for the rest of the town board, we are in June, and yes, the year is only half over, but about 60% of the construction season from a fundamental standpoint, legalese and everything else is already done. We do not have a line item for highway construction that's funded in 2023. We also have a line item for road maintenance that is funded in 2023. My understanding in looking through invoices, talking with Laura, past board members and that type of thing, is that the road maintenance line item in our budget is for things like plowing, potholing, mowing, that type of work. It is not for maintenance, i.e. crack sealing, i.e. chip sealing, that type of maintenance. The highway construction fund was used for that. So with a zero in that account, we have, number one, no ability to fund any sort of road work in 2023. So what we tried to do at the highway committee was to discuss the most pressing / pertinent, feasible and financially realistic approach to things moving forward. We discussed the budget, the general fund balance as of 12/31/2022, and ARPA funding. Those are essentially the three buckets that we have funds allocated or allocatable. Additionally, we also have a fund with the county for highway and bridge aid. There are more stipulations to the use of those funds than there would be via ARPA or via utilizing some of the general fund balance. But roughly there's $23,000 in that account with the highway, Jefferson County Highway Department. We can use some of it for the culvert on South Shore Drive, which I don't think we have the invoice yet, whatever that comes back at. We could also use some of that funding to replace additional culverts that we have at some point in time in the future, and we can use that money if the county does work on our behalf, whether it's chip sealing or any other work that they do. But that program is closing in 2024, so we have this year and 2024 to use that $23,000 before it's unleveraged, essentially. ARPA funding, as of audit time, there was $33,290 in the ARPA account, and the general fund balance was $217,000. So a focus that we had was to preserve roads that are teetering on the edge of needing a different type of maintenance, right? So if there's a road that's decent, that has been chip sealed, and it was 10 years ago, it's been chip sealed, and there's a whole bunch of roads that haven't been. There's a bunch of roads that are in that area where they're past the point of doing chip sealing, and at some point they're gonna have to get overlaid. And there's roads that are past the point of being overlaid and are gonna need to be reconstructed. So we were trying to find that pocket or sweet spot of roads that had been paved or wedged and sealed at some point in the recent past, where we could use road funding, preserve a road, and not have to overlay it at some point in the future, which is 5 times more expensive than it is to do a chip seal. So one of those segments was Hooper Road, primarily from Zion to Z. Additionally, from Zion to E was repaved or overlaid in 2016. So we're already 7 years into it. Because of the location and the fact that it's one segment of road, marginally could go either way. We look at Zion to Z and try to do that, or we say, you know what, we're already there. It's 8,600 linear feet from Zion to Z, and it's another 3,800 linear feet from Zion to E. Do we want to do all of it? Do we want to do none of it? Whatever. Ultimately, we have zero funding allocated for 2023, and if we're going to do anything, we need funding. Number two is if we're going to do anything we as the highway committee pretty much have to meet next week and get all this together so that we can actually meet the statutory calendar to be able to come back in July and award that work. And that's as fast as we would have to do this to really have a chance at doing any road work. The other alternative is we say, okay, we're up against the gun, we know what it is. At the end of all of this, even if we were to bid it out, get it back in July, get an award, Mother Nature may say, thanks, but no thanks. If it gets cold in October, late September, whatever it is, we may not wanna do it, and number two, we may not be able to do anything. But we could pocket the allocated money, figure out a game plan, and really roll into budget season for 2024, and figure out where do we need the money and when specifically, and try to get support for that in the future. Leaving this meeting, if we could walk away with the fact that the remaining ARPA funding is going to be allocated to road construction, i.e. chip seal, crack seal, paving, wedging, whatever it is, in 2023 or 2024, I think that would be a win for the committee, and I think it would be a win for the community. Additionally, doing some rough math on this, and this is very rough math, but we've got, bear with me if you can. We've got roughly $46,000 to be able, that we would need to be able to chip seal Zion to Z. Right, and another 17,500 to be able to go from Zion to E. So we would be looking at $60,000 to be able to do Hooper from E to Z. As a tongue twister there. But we've got 33 in our budget, which means we would need ballpark another 27,000 or so to be able to actually do that segment if we were to bid it out. That money would have to come from somewhere. General fund balance, potentially the county funds, if only the county is the one that's gonna do the work and that type of thing. But we're at a point with offset to this, with road maintenance, we've got a budget of $179,622. Okay, that was what was budgeted for road maintenance, plowing, potholing, all that kind of stuff. At the end of May's meeting, we had roughly $150,000 of that spent. Since that point, tonight we approved $12,397, which means we're at $162,500 roughly right now out of $179,600. So we've got $17,000 to get us through the rest of the year, and we got $8,000 in mowing in the spring and $9,500 in the fall. So we're going to be short by $100 if we mow the grass this year, and it doesn't snow between now and January 1st. So we need to seriously consider and be able to forecast, present, and everything else to everybody in this community the reason why funding roads, funding road maintenance is imperative. Because we're not even July 4th and we're literally already in the hole. So we're gonna have to consider doing a budget amendment sometime, in my own opinion, after we get done with the spring mowing and we know where we landed with, there's potentially one invoice still out there for potholing. We're gonna know what the invoices are for mowing for the spring round is. And we're gonna be able to make a ballpark of $9,500 to mow in the fall. And look back at invoices of what it costs to snowplow, let's just say 3 times, right? Cross your fingers, it only snows 3 times between October and the end of December. But we need to allocate some of that funding, and that $217,000 general fund balance, assuming that the budget was balanced and that it wasn't just underbalanced by a line item, functionally versus theoretically on paper, that $217,000 is pretty much all we got to roll with into the future. So if it was balanced on paper and it wasn't balanced from an operational standpoint, that number is going to get significantly smaller by the close of 2023.
Okay, out of that 200, how much is in the general fund again?
At the end of 23, at the end of 22, it was 217,000.
What's in the general fund now?
Or what did we have on the?
I thought I wrote down 351. 306.
306.
The second half of taxes are coming in. What does that usually produce for us?
I
money that's coming in, right?
But then you also have to look at the fact that you're gonna have 2 more payments for firing the amounts,
So
which
that's
would
gonna
be
bring up next, is
under 10,000.
So the minimum that you'd like to see us grab, if we find it, is for doing at least one Zion Road? The minimum is.
To be able to do Hooper from E to Z, I'm ballparking is gonna be $60,000. We've got 33, again, round numbers, 33 of ARPA funding that is undesignated as of right now. ARPA funding has to be essentially latched by contract by the end of 2024. It can be spent into 2025, but it has to be allocated and contracted for by the end of 2024. The good news is as of whenever it was a week ago, it sounds like Governor Evers and legislature has come to a mild resolution on this whole shared revenue. And if things hold, the town is gonna be looking at roughly $51,000 in additional shared revenue from the state in 2024. So there's a little bit of bump that we're gonna get from the revenue standpoint, but, I mean, the ungodly thing that nobody wants to say is it's gonna cost $350,000 a year for the next 20 years to be able to keep up with our roads, and right now we have 0 allocated. And, I mean, it's a big fat ugly number, but sooner or later, we're gonna have to talk about it and do that. And
What's better to get on top of it now? The longer we wait, the worse it gets.
right. My scary outlook with this whole thing is that we've got $217,000 of fund balance, right? I'm gonna say generally we have 0 in our LGIPs, because it's not 0, but it's generally close to 0, or it's not, there's no buying power behind it. So we've got $217,000 to be able to float the worst case scenario without us borrowing money. Borrowing money right now is not exactly the most prime thing, although we're municipalities, we'll be able to get a better rate than, John Q. Public, but borrowing right now is not as advantageous as it could have been 3 years ago. That $217,000 number, if we're running $10,000 of snowfall, just saying, it's not a ton between that and a road exploding that we have to do some sort of significant fix between now and the end of the year, or even in January, because we don't have any additional funds, right? We don't get funding just because it's January 1st. We actually have to wait for money to come in and where are we gonna spend it, all that kind of stuff. So I'm cautious in the fact that we've got 200 grand in general fund that is not specifically allocated to any project whatsoever, but we only have $200,000 essentially to our name.
You know, we can't count on it, but when will we hear about any grants?
I reached out to Lynch 2.5 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago maybe, and there wasn't any news on that front, but depending on what the grants portray or what they don't, and I understand there's a ton of grants that are out there. Federal grants, essentially administered through WSDOT, are a whole different level of administrative requirements for the community. What road design looks like, what the cost share part of it is, and the grant funding, and well, he already left, but the grant funding through WSDOT is one of those things where you eat up a lot of what the grant provides by the additional costs you incur versus what you normally would if you went through due diligence on your own. So there's opportunities. I misspoke, I think, the last meeting as far as which roads were on that list, but we don't have any yes or no on that, and even if we did, by the time that we got that notice and tried to do the solicitation through statute, it's past construction for 23. We've realistically got 3 weeks, not even 3 weeks. If we leave this meeting tonight with $60,000, we could potentially chip seal Hooper Road this year. If we don't leave it with $60,000, we're looking at 2024, because we don't have funding to be able to just massage around what the road plan is. So, least case scenario in my mind is that a win for the road block is that the remaining ARPA funding be designated for road construction. If there's a comfort factor with an additional 30 grand, 27,000, out of general fund, again, that brings us down to $190,000, let's just say, in the general fund balance at the close of 2022. That's our buffer for 2023, is $190,000 plus or minus. And we don't know where we're gonna land on that.
And the 110 for the fire has to come out, and
That's a different, that comes out of, let's say that comes out of Laura's 306 at this point versus, so there's a $100,000 window between where we closed 22 and where we are right now.
so to get at least Hooper Road, one road done, you're looking at 65 to 70,000.
60 is my ballpark.
And there's 33 in the ARPA fund.
Correct.
So you're looking for 30,000.
He's looking for the 33,000
We've got
tonight.
that. Well,
We still have to make a motion to allocate it to the roads.
Correct.
And then we have to also think about where do we come up with the other 27,000?
okay.
Do we take it out of the general fund?
So we could have two motions, one on the ARPA here and one on
Does
the.
it be two motions or one?
If it was me, it would be one, but
Well, we can use the ARPA funds for the road. I wanna make a motion that we exhaust the ARPA funds, roughly 33,000, and take 30,000 from the general, balance to come up with $60,000 to take care of Hooper Road. From E to Z.
Is Hooper the top priority? I mean,
The whole
From-
works is a
that's a
priority.
whole black hole, I know.
from what perspective? Is it the worst road in the community? Absolutely not. I'll say it right now, and anybody on Hooper, I'm hopefully don't, irritate it enough, but Hooper Road is not the worst road in this community. There's a portion of Hooper, everything that's west of E on Hooper, that's awful. But unfortunately, there's 15 houses on it, and the people that use Hooper between Z and E as a bypass, use Hooper between Z and E as a bypass. Marsh is very similar to that, Tamarack is very similar to that, Little Prairie is very similar, like that whole functionality of the people who live there aren't the ones that are using the road. You know, South Shore Drive, again, people on the lake, the people that use South Shore Drive live on South Shore Drive because there's no other throughput to that point, right?
Sure.
So when we're looking at it from, is it the biggest priority? No. Is it a place where we can spend money and not have to worry about that road for 7 years? Absolutely.
Yeah, Marsh is bad too.
Well, that's up for a possible
Yeah.
grant too, isn't it?
It
Marcia?
is. Yeah. So that's one of the other pieces that we're looking at, is to try to figure out what's been applied for, and I don't want to say shelve it for the time being, but hear something more, because right now, we don't have the funding to be able to do it even if we wanted to. Marsh, the segment of Marsh Road is, I'm gonna say, generally the same length, but it's not exactly laid out the same because of where overlays have been done. And Hooper doesn't need any wedging, Marsh potentially does before it gets sealed. And at that point, it gets thrown into a different bucket because the cost is higher than what it would be just to chip or to slay. And again, we're talking about two different projects, products, applications of what could we do, but we could get pricing for both and see which one's more cost advantageous and make it, a secondary decision.
That pushes us out into that 3-week window though that you had mentioned.
We need to get our public notice in next week's newspaper, period.
I second the motion.
So,
Okay, there's been a motion to use all the ARPA funds, roughly 33,000 left for new road construction, and take an additional 30,000 from the general fund to take care of Hooper Road and whatever Josh comes up with, chip seal, sliding seal, or whatever, from E to Z. Is there any more discussion?
I'm assuming you want me to move forward with noticing that in the newspaper as a public bid.
Yes, and noticing it in the newspaper.
And at that point, when we come back in July, if everything goes seamlessly between now and then, pricing that we get back and be able to make a decision of what that final, we've got 290 in ARPA and we've got a delta still over here. If it comes back and somebody's gonna charge us $73,000 for it, well, we can weigh approving it or not at that point, but again, pricing is pricing and budget is budget.
And you
so-
said something earlier about there's some funds at the county if the county does the work.
Correct, we would be able to apply those, which would mean we wouldn't have to use general fund balance to make up the difference.
So if we allocate it tonight, but it turns out the county is the chosen one, we wouldn't have to use it.
Right, we would have to then designate using the highway and bridge aid funds in lieu of general fund balance. Or you could keep general fund balance and do more projects in 2024 with that same 22 grand.
Okay, I'm gonna restate the motion. The motion's been made to use up the $33,000 ARPA funds for new road construction as well as utilize $30,000 from the general fund and have Josh post it in the newspaper. All in favor?
Second.
We already got a second.
And repeat it. And if I need
Oh
a second,
my God, I'm gonna die on this stuff for grapes. Okay, is there a second?
yes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyway, it's fun, I guess.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
There's been a motion to adjourn and a second. Any more discussion on that? We're adjourned.